Welcome back. Today we are diving deep into a story that honestly still feels almost unbelievable, the rise and spectacular fraudulent fall of Theranos. Our main guide here is John Carreyrou's phenomenal book, Bad Blood. It's really the definitive account. And our mission today, well, it's to go beyond just the headlines. We want to unpack how this biotech startup, Theranos, which promised to completely revolutionize healthcare, how it soared to a $9 billion valuation, essentially on hype, before it all imploded as this massive and, frankly, dangerous fraud. The core promise, remember this, running hundreds of blood tests, super fast, super cheap, all from a single tiny drop of blood from your finger.
It really is an incredible story, almost like a thriller, but tragically real. And at the center, Elizabeth Holmes. She founded Theranos in 2003, dropped out of Stanford at 19, hailed as this visionary, became the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. But it's a story of ambition totally disconnected from ethics. You know, it really shows what happens when that fake it till you make it mantra hits something as critical as healthcare.
And that faking it started with the image, didn't it? Let's talk about that persona she built. Bad Blood goes into detail about how deliberately she modeled herself on Steve Jobs.
Oh, absolutely. The black turtlenecks became iconic.
Right. And the secrecy, too. Intense secrecy around the tech.
And it wasn't just the clothes, the voice.
Yeah, the voice. She consciously deepened her voice, lowered her register to sound more authoritative, grave.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about how manufactured the whole thing was. And then the claims for the machines themselves, the Edison, the mini lab.
They weren't just pitching a slightly better product. They were pitching a revolution in diagnostics, a complete paradigm shift.
And that combination, this charismatic, secretive founder, plus this world-changing idea, well, it was like catnip for investors. They raised an astonishing amount, over $700 million.
Wow.
But it's not just the amount, it's who invested. That's key. They didn't just go after the usual Silicon Valley VCs.
Right. They targeted these huge establishment names.
Huge names. Rupert Murdoch, the media giant, Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, former secretaries of state, Larry Ellison from Oracle.
So these are figures who bring enormous credibility. Why them specifically?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like they'd have the deep science background to vet the tech.
Well, that's exactly the point, isn't it? It suggests the goal wasn't really about scientific validation early on. It was about acquiring gravitas, political and social weight.
Okay. So if you have George Shultz on your board.
Right. The assumption kicks in the tech must be real. Or at least the company is too connected, too big to fail.
It plays into that whole Silicon Valley fear of missing out, the FOMO thing.
Precisely. And that's the aha moment for you, the listener. You see how, in that world, a compelling story and a prestigious board can sometimes completely overshadow actual scientific proof.
People bought the vision.
They bought the vision, and it allowed them to skip the hard part, the technical due diligence, especially when the potential payout seemed astronomical.
Which leads us directly to the technological lie at the heart of it all. And this part, reading Bad Blood, it's just staggering. The tech, it just didn't work.
No, not even close. The tests were incredibly unreliable, wildly inaccurate.
But why? Was it just buggy software or something more fundamental?
It was much more fundamental. We should probably spend a second on the science here because it wasn't just a glitch. The whole idea kind of defied basic chemistry.
Right.
See, standard blood tests, especially for multiple things at once, need a decent amount of blood plasma or serum to get reliable measurements. You need enough molecules to count accurately, basically.
Right, you need a certain volume.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Statistical viability. A finger prick gives you a tiny, tiny drop of capillary blood, and it's mixed with other fluids from the tissue.
Interstitial fluid, yeah.
Right. So the sample is small and contaminated. You simply can't get accurate, repeatable results for things like cholesterol or hormones or complex markers from that. It was basically doomed from the start scientifically.
Regardless of the machine itself.
Correct. The foundational premise, that single drop, was flawed based on known biology and physics.
Okay, so if the science was impossible and the machines couldn't actually do the tests reliably, how did they hide that? Especially once they partnered with Walgreens and had real patients coming in.
Well, that required an operational cover-up that was just audacious. They had to process real patient samples for Walgreens. They couldn't use the Edison or mini lab for most of it.
So what do?
They essentially ran 2 labs in secret. The book lays it out. They'd take the patient samples, sometimes finger pricks, sometimes regular vein draws.
Wait, even regular vein draws?
Yeah.
So much for the finger prick revolution.
Often, yes. Then they dilute the samples, and here's the kicker. They ran the vast majority of tests not on their own revolutionary machines,
But on.
commercial machines, standard, off-the-shelf analyzers made by competitors like Siemens.
No.
Yes. They literally bought competitors' equipment and hid it away in back rooms, running the patient tests on those while pretending the results came from their own tech. It required this massive coordinated deception inside the company.
That's astounding. And this is where it shifts, isn't it? From financial lies to something much, much worse, actual patient danger.
Exactly. This isn't just about fooling investors anymore. This is about people's health.
What were the consequences for patients who got these faulty results?
Well, the consequences were devastating. A complete betrayal of trust. Because the tests were inaccurate, patients got dangerously wrong results. Bad blood details some terrifying examples. False positives for things like HIV.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Incorrect results for blood clotting factors, leading people to potentially take wrong doses of blood thinners. Misdiagnoses related to cancer markers. False results about miscarriage risk.
Imagine getting that kind of news based on faulty tech. The fear, the anxiety.
Exactly. The emotional trauma, the unnecessary treatments, or stopping necessary ones. It's why health tech demands such rigorous oversight, FDA, CMS. These agencies exist for a reason. Ambition can't override safety.
Okay, so to keep a lid on that level of deception, running fake labs, faking data, endangering patients,
Yeah.
you need an iron grip internally, right? Which brings us to the culture inside Theranos.
Oh, absolutely. Section 3, the culture of fear. Holmes and her COO, Sunny Balwani, who was also her romantic partner, a fact hidden for years.
Another layer of secrecy.
They ran the place with intense paranoia and intimidation. Balwani especially is described as this enforcer figure.
How did they keep employees quiet?
The main weapon was extreme secrecy, enforced by incredibly strict non-disclosure agreements, NDAs.
Standard in tech, but these were different.
Weaponized NDAs, so restrictive, employees felt they couldn't even talk about their work vaguely with family. If you were a scientist inside and realized the tech was bunk, which many did, very quickly, you were legally gagged immediately. The threat of lawsuits was constant.
It sounds less like a startup, more like a police state. Were there other intimidation tactics?
Yes. The book describes surveillance, monitoring employee emails and movements, isolating anyone who questioned things.
Wow.
Balwani apparently would corner people, berate them. If you pointed out a problem with the science or the data, you weren't thanked, you were seen as a troublemaker. You'd likely be fired and maybe threatened legally on your way out.
So dissent was just completely crushed.
Utterly. And beyond silencing people, they actively manipulated data when investors or regulators or partners like Walgreens needed proof.
They cooked the books. Or the data, rather.
Essentially, yes. They'd cherry-pick results, run tests over and over until they got one that looked plausible, discard the rest. It wasn't just covering up failures, it was calculated, systemic fraud to keep the whole illusion going.
And the whistleblowers. The ones who tried to get the truth out. What happened to them? Bad Blood tells some harrowing stories there.
Their experiences really show the power Theranos wielded. People like Tyler Schultz, George Schultz's grandson, ironically.
Right, working inside the company.
Yes, and Erica Chung. They faced immediate aggressive retaliation, bullying, legal threats that were incredibly intimidating, private investigators, surveillance.
So Holmes and Balwani used top-tier aggressive lawyers.
Oh, yes. David Boyes' firm, Boyes, Schiller, Flexner, famous for its tough tactics. They were deployed to silence dissenters, threaten journalists, sue former employees. The message was crystal clear. Challenge us, and we will crush you with legal fees and intimidation. It took immense courage for people like Schultz and Chung to eventually go to regulators and to John Carreyrou at the Wall Street Journal.
Which, thankfully, brings us to the turning point. The power of investigative journalism. The whole house of cards started to wobble in 2015. John Carreyrou at the WSJ got a tip.
Right, from a medical expert who was suspicious about the Theranos claims.
And Carreyrou started digging. But it wasn't easy, was it? Holmes and Boyes threw everything at him.
Everything. Legal threats against him, against the journal, claims he was stealing trade secrets, violating NDAs. They even tried to pressure Rupert Murdoch, who owns the journal and was a Theranos investor.
Talk about pressure.
Immense pressure. But Carreyrou and the journal didn't back down. They published that first explosive article in October 2015 laying out the deception.
And the dam broke.
Instantly. The dominoes just started falling.
What was the immediate fallout after the WSJ stories hit?
Swift and severe. Government agencies jumped in, the SEC, the Department of Justice, CMS.
Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they regulate labs, right?
Exactly. And CMS found huge problems, major deficiencies in their lab practices. They essentially banned Holmes from running a lab. Theranos lost its lab certifications. Walgreens pulled out. The company just disintegrated.
And then came the criminal charges.
Indictments in 2018. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud against both Holmes and Balwani.
These weren't just fines. This was serious.
Very serious criminal charges. And it led to convictions. In 2022, Holmes was found guilty on 4 counts, importantly, including fraud against patients, not just investors, sentenced to over 11 years in prison.
And Balwani.
Also convicted. His sentence was even slightly longer, nearly 13 years.
So, real jail time. Not just a slap on the wrist for white-collar crime that put people's health at risk.
Absolutely, which is significant. And the whole saga, documented so powerfully in Bad Blood, became this huge cautionary tale.
A morality tale, as you said earlier.
Yeah. It really shook Silicon Valley, sparked debates about that visionary founder worship, about the lack of due diligence, especially when billions are flying around, and the absolute need for ethics and scientific rigor in health tech.
It really underscores how that potent mix, the charisma, the secrecy, the investor greed, the powerful connections, allowed this dangerous fraud to fester for so long, right at the top.
Exactly. The system, in many ways, failed because the key players were incentivized, consciously or not, to believe the hype rather than scrutinize the reality. The pressure to deliver those huge returns overrode basic checks and balances.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? The source material mentions how quickly the adaptations came out. The HBO doc, The Inventor, the Hulu series, The Dropout.
Almost immediately.
Yeah, almost before the ink was dry on the court proceedings. So here's a final thought for you, our listener. What does that immediate, almost hungry rush to watch dramatized versions of this massive corporate fraud tell us about ourselves? About our relationship with tech, with ambition, with ethics, and maybe with our fascination with the visionary founder archetype, even after they fall so hard. Something to think about next time you hear about a unicorn startup promising the impossible.